design your mission to Mars, which will hopefully, I will write it up and will be offered more. This one, oh thanks, is different. So what we did is we have 3 different groups of cards. And I've designed them nicely. So we got orange cards, green cards, and blue cards. And so I think we've got 4 sets. Do you remember 4?
That sounds right.
Yeah, we've got 4 sets, so you kind of group them up. So this one you can't do with like multiple classes probably, just like one class at a time. And so what they do is they're designing the mission. So the first thing, we start off with the same as the powders. You introduce Mars and characteristics and the fact that we have to send rovers and satellites and that sort of thing. And so what you do is you want to harp on like, what is your science question? Why do you want to go to Mars? And it's kind of one of the big things is they're not allowed to do this activity unless they come up with what their science goal is. Why is it that you want to go to Mars? And it could be like anything. It could be like, oh, I want to send humans and I want to see if it's safe. Or I want to go and find water. Or I want to see if there's life there. Or even like, I want to see if this volcano is going to explode. Or I want to see what that rock looks like. They come up with all sorts of things. Here's an example. They get to draw the rover. So you start off and you want them they come up with a mission name and they write their team members down. They have their science question. So this one was, can we live on Mars? So it's a good science question. And you want to be like, okay, what is, you need to pick instruments that are going to go into fulfilling that science objective. And so what they do is they can first choose what type of spacecraft they want. So we've got a bunch of different ones. There's lander, so like the Viking landers, the Phoenix lander, rovers like Curiosity and exploration rovers, and then we've got some other more exotic ones. We've got balloon, kind of float around Mars, a drone, kids like drones, flying around. Hopper robot has been proposed for Mars, so we got that. And they've got like pros and cons. So that's what you want to be getting at them, is understanding what are the pros and cons of like, okay, if I send a drone, it's going to cost a lot. So that's the other thing about this, is that you've got a budget of $1 billion. So we just put it as 1,000 million because a lot of times we try to get it so that you can go from like 3rd graders to like high schoolers. And it's easier for the little kids to add up to 1,000 than it is to add up to $1 billion, if you just write $1 billion. So everything has a price tag associated with it. So they choose one type of spacecraft. Obviously the drone is the most expensive and gives you more navigation, but you can't put like a drill onto a drone. And so that's something you kind of want to go around walking and make sure like they're not putting everything on top of a drone, because that's not feasible. Whereas a balloon, you can't really steer where you're going to go, but you can float around, it's cheaper. But again, other pros and cons. So generally they'll choose rovers or landers, which is what you want, because that's why NASA has chosen rovers and landers. So they'll choose that. They also have to choose a place where they're going to go. So these are the greens. They can only choose one of these. And they're just the different places with different varying degrees of how expensive they are. The ones that are more expensive are like Olympus Mons on the North Pole. Generally, this is just because you can mention that this is an engineering constraint in that you have less atmosphere and therefore it's harder to land on here. And therefore, we made it more expensive. If you're thinking about like Olympus Mons and they're like, I want to see if there's life here, we'll think, okay, is there a lot of life in a volcano? Sort of thing, and is that easier to like make fossils if you are more fossil inclined? So you can kind of like draw in your own experience into like where you might want to go. So whatever you study, you can make a case for why you might not want to go different places. But again, you can just read these cards ahead of time, like on your drive there. Just a couple like pros and cons, where you want to go. And then the big thing that they're going to do is with the leftover money, because sometimes it'll be like, I want to go to the most expensive place with the drone, the most expensive spacecraft, and then they have like no money left for any space instruments. So you have to be like, okay, well then maybe you have to change where you're going to go, because you need to actually have science equipment to do your science. So there's a bunch of different things. They all have different prices, and you can go through these. Generally what I do is at the beginning when you're introducing yourself and Mars, you kind of quickly go through the different things and be like, pro con, pro con, pro con, so they have a general idea. But yeah, like you can look through these. They're all pretty similar. There's one that we put in here that's kind of like a tricky one, is a telescope. Typically, you don't put a telescope onto Mars because we have telescopes on Earth, but it's cheap, and they could put it on if they wanted to. If you wanted to like study the moons of Mars, you might have this, but typically you want to stay away from this, and then they can use all sorts of other things. But make sure that what instruments they're picking go to their science objective. That's kind of the big thing here, is make sure that it all fits together. They list it out. They shouldn't go over budget, so they have a budget of 1,000 million, so make sure they have nothing left. And then they get to draw what their spacecraft looks like. And they usually have fun with that. And that's about it.